Welcome to today's webinar on security considerations when running Oracle Business Suite in the cloud webinar. My name is Phil Ryman. I'm the Director of Business Development at Integrigy, and I'll be the moderator for this e-learning session. Our speaker today is Steve Coase. Steve is a Chief Technology Officer and founder of Integrigy Corporation. He's been working with Oracle products since 1994. For the past 17 years, Steve has focused on the security and the auditing aspects of the Oracle Business Suite and the Oracle Database, and has written and presented at these topics at various national and regional conferences, including OAUG and the National Collaborative. I'll now turn it over to Steve.
Thanks so much, Phil. So today's webinar is regarding the cloud. And so a lot of our clients are actually looking to deploy Oracle Business Suite into the cloud. They're running it today on-premise, and they're actually looking at the benefits. And one of the questions that always pops up is security. How do we actually make sure this is secure when we're actually running in the cloud? And so we'll kind of talk about a few different aspects of Oracle Business Suite in the cloud and talk about what the cloud means. Because in terms of Oracle Business Suite, it doesn't necessarily mean as much as people want it to mean, but there's definitely a lot of advantages, but there's also some things that you should consider around security. So before we get started, a quick background about Integrigy. Integrigy was founded in 2001 by former Big Six consultants working on large ERP implementations. Back then, people weren't even changing the app's password. And so Integrigy specializes in Oracle Business Suite security, as well as we also do PeopleSoft now and do a lot of Oracle database work. Integrigy has two sides of our business. One is products. So we do have a product called App Sentry that will actually scan your Oracle Business Suite environment and audit it for security. So it's actually looking for default passwords, if your database initialization parameters are set correctly, your system profile options in the application. We'll check all your patch levels at both the application server, the application, and the database level. So this is taking the secure configuration guide, which Integrigy wrote for Oracle, and blowing that out to, that has about 20 or 30 checks. We're checking about 200 different things within the Oracle Business Suite and database to validate that it's a secure environment. Our other product is App Defend, which is an enterprise application firewall specifically designed for Oracle Business Suite. So one of the key advantages of App Defend is it provides a virtual patching capability for Oracle Business Suite. So if you're not applying the critical patch updates on a timely basis, App Defend will help protect you. A lot of this presentation, though, is from our services side of our business. So we're every single day doing on-site security assessments for our clients, verifying and validating that their Oracle Business Suite environments, their Oracle databases are secure, doing sensitive data searches, helping them with their compliance challenges around SOX, GDPR, PCI, and also doing security design work. So how do you set up auditing? How do you set up encryption? How do you install Oracle Database Vault? How do you actually make sure your environment's secure when you're moving into the Oracle Cloud? And then finally, we're backed up by a world-class research team. So we found more security bugs in Oracle Business Suite than anyone else out there. So we're actually actively working with Oracle to find security bugs, make sure they're patched in the Oracle Business Suite, as well as really find out the best way. How do you actually secure this monster of an application? Again, Oracle Business Suite is a massive, large application. So what's the best things you can do to actually make sure it's secure and it's working properly? So enough about Integrigy. Let's jump into the presentation here. And first talk about what does the cloud mean and what's the impact on Oracle Business Suite. And then we'll actually talk about deploying Oracle Business Suite in the cloud. What are some of the options? What are the different things that you can do? And then we'll jump into recommendations and approaches. How do you secure this in the cloud? How is it different from being on-premise? And then finally, we'll touch base on some of the specific database security features that we think you should be implementing when you're deploying Oracle Business Suite to the cloud, because there's some things that you can actually do differently in the cloud that you can't do on-premise, or you can do it cheaper in the cloud. And then we'll finally open it up some questions and answers. So let's start off and talk a little bit about the cloud. What do we mean? What are we talking about when we're talking about the cloud, especially in terms of Oracle Business Suite? So the cloud is really inevitable. That's coming down. Most organizations are looking at it. A lot have already actually deployed some applications into the cloud. Some already have applications that are cloud-based applications, things like Salesforce, which is a true service, software as a service application. And really, if you think about the cloud, think about it has evolved from outsourcing and hosting. So 5 years ago, we would talk about outsourcing and hosting, taking your Oracle Business Suite and outsourcing it somewhere. What the cloud does is actually takes that and now moves it up the stack a little bit. It's now providing you more services, but fundamentally it's still that same outsourcing. So one of the key reasons that we think a lot of organizations will be running in the cloud in the future is when you think about your organization, what's your competitive advantage? How can you beat your competitors? Is running a data center part of that competitive advantage? It's probably not. You should be focusing on making products, delivering services to clients versus trying to run data centers. There's organizations like Amazon, Oracle that can run a data center much better than you can at a much cheaper cost because they're doing it at scale. So that's really the main driver, we believe, of the cloud coming in the future is that cost factor. And these clouds are becoming commodities because, again, they're just providing paint, power, and pipe. They're just providing that data center. They're providing that hardware, things that you don't need to be worrying about where you're now worried about, okay, how do we run e-business suite? How do we do what we need to do in the application much better and not worry about popping up servers and making sure the network stays up and that we've got backups in the data center, we've got power to the data center, things like that. So really a lot of organizations are moving towards the cloud as this cost efficiency, as this efficiency overall in the organization. So we feel most organizations in the next few years, especially with applications like Oracle Business Suite, 2 to 5 years is when they'll be really looking at potentially moving this into the cloud, with smaller organizations moving it today and then larger organizations moving into the future. So the big question is, how does the cloud change Oracle Business Suite security? What should I be thinking about? And it's really not the what, but it's really the why and the how. How am I actually securing this application? What do I need to be doing at what time? But why do I need to secure it differently? What are the risks in the cloud? Things like now I've opened up on shared hardware potentially. I'm running VMs that may be shared not only by my organization, but by other organizations. What is the impact of that? But at the end of the day, there's the fundamental principle. I've got Oracle Business Suite with a massive amount of data in it. It may be my financial data, it may be customer data, it may be supplier data. So I've got a lot of data in my Oracle Business Suite environment. And no matter where I run it, if I run it internally, if I run it in the cloud, it's still my data. At the end of the day, your organization is still responsible for your data, regardless of where it's stored. And so really, when you think about the legal and compliance mandates, when we're talking about GDPR, PCI, HIPAA, SOX, well, I'm still responsible for those at the end of the day, no matter where I run this. If I run it on premise, if I run it in the cloud, I'm still responsible for that data. So now I'm actually taking that responsibility and actually extending it out. I'm transferring it partially to that cloud provider. So I'm just extending what I have to protect. I'm having to scale up that security. I'm also potentially opening up my data to more insiders. So when we're talking about a cloud resource provider, hey, they've got Linux admins, they've got hardware admins, they've got storage admins. So those potentially are people who can also access my data. So I have to make sure that when I'm talking about the cloud, I know what I'm doing, and I understand who has access to that data and for what reasons. And so when we now talk about security responsibility and start looking at the different types of clouds out there, and when people talk about clouds, I'm going to now jump back a little bit, and there's a lot of different definitions of the cloud. The cloud is just, it's a cloudy place. There's lots of different things going on, lots of different service offerings, lots of different capabilities. And when we talk about e-business suite, we're going to get very specific here. But when we generally talk about different types of clouds, we're talking about infrastructure as a service first, and then platform as a service. We also have database as a service offerings, and then finally software as a service offerings. So when we talk about software as a service, we're talking about things like Salesforce. Truly, a SaaS offering is an application that's running in the cloud that you don't necessarily have control over directly. You're not applying the patches to Salesforce. You're not doing upgrades to Salesforce. That's a whole different animal than Oracle Business Suite environment. And when we're talking about Oracle Business Suite on the internet, we're talking a little bit differently. We're talking about it as much more of an infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and potentially based on some of the different cloud vendors, database as a service. So today's webinar is going to be specifically around Oracle Business Suite in the cloud. We also have Oracle ERP Cloud, which is a different product. It is based a lot off Oracle Business Suite, and there is a migration path, but when I move to Oracle ERP Cloud, I'm doing a migration. So it's very important to understand internally in the organization. When you're talking about moving your Oracle ERP environment to the cloud, what are you meaning? Many organizations mean, well, we're moving Oracle Business Suite into the cloud. We're taking a lift and shift approach. We're taking what we have on-premise today, the same application, the same data, the same configuration, and just taking that and running it fundamentally on different hardware. So when we're talking about Oracle Business Suite in the cloud, we're talking about running it as infrastructure as a service, as a platform as a service, where I still control and own the application. I'm actually even controlling and owning the database in a lot of aspects of that. That's very different than other organizations who are saying, no, we're actually moving to Oracle ERP Cloud. We're going to re-implement. We're going to actually change this application and get rid of Oracle Business Suite and move to Oracle ERP Cloud. So you always have to be careful when that discussion comes up by management. What does management mean? What are they actually intending to do? Do they mean just lift and shift Oracle Business Suite without doing a re-implementation? Or are they actually looking for Oracle ERP Cloud moving to a different application to the SaaS model? So it's a very different discussion because what I can do, how I have to secure this is very different between Oracle ERP Cloud and Oracle Business Suite in the cloud. However, today's webinar is very much focused on Oracle Business Suite in the cloud. We aren't going to talk about Oracle ERP Cloud at all. So when we start talking about Oracle Business Suite in the cloud, what do we mean? Well, Oracle Business Suite in the cloud means that I'm just running the same application that I'm running on-premise, and I'm just taking it and shifting it into the cloud. And the cloud resources I'm going to use are really infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. So I'm going to have my cloud provider providing me network servers, but they are not going to be providing me necessarily the application, the database, or even in some cases the operating system. So they're going to be firing up servers for me. I'll have blank servers, and then I can either install a new Oracle Business Suite environment just as I would do on-premise, or I can just basically copy what I have and copy up there. So when we're talking about Oracle Business Suite and the service, there is not a lot of magic behind the scenes. So this is just providing that base layer of support, and I may get some additional capabilities along the way. I may get some cloud management capabilities where they're doing they're having sophisticated counsels to do cloning and backups for me. But on a day-to-day basis, my DBAs are probably going to be doing very similar activities. Where if I look at Oracle ERP Cloud, it's a very different world that I have my DBAs basically go away in that environment. So we're going to focus in on Oracle Business Suite here and what's the impact when you start thinking about the cloud. Also, when we start talking about the cloud, what do we mean in terms of cloud providers? Each cloud provider out there has slightly different capabilities. And during this presentation, we're looking to focus in on two. We're going to focus in on Oracle and also Amazon Web Services. The first reason for Oracle is that it's the premier Oracle Business Suite provider. They're the ones who wrote the application. They can kind of do it best. They have the most dedicated infrastructure for Oracle Business Suite. The reason we're going to talk about Amazon Web Services, or AWS, is primarily because a lot of organizations are shifting a lot of their internal compute into Amazon's web services, and we'll refer to it as AWS from now on. Therefore, Oracle Business Suite is kind of taken along for the ride. So we're seeing a lot of organizations moving hundreds of applications. Oracle Business Suite is one of them, so they're trying to take Oracle Business Suite and move it into AWS also. And we talk about AWS, there's a couple different features and capabilities. It does have an Oracle database service called Relational Database Services, which allows you to run an Oracle database in the cloud at AWS. Unfortunately, that does not support Oracle Business Suite at all. So when we're talking about AWS, we're just talking about their computing capabilities. So they're providing you servers and operating systems, but they are not providing you any database services. Everything that you're doing is above and beyond that. You're installing the database. You're providing full support for the database. And then there's a number of other specialized vendors out there, and some of these actually use AWS as a background service and things like that. So there is data intensity, Rackspace, Syntax, Velocity. So there's a bunch of other companies. These are just some of the ones that we worked with in the past. So that's why I've included them here. And when we look at the services offered by these different cloud vendors, you can really differentiate it into two different areas. One is true cloud hosting. So they're taking your Oracle Business Suite environment and hosting it on their servers. It's within their data centers. But as an optional service, they're also truly providing Oracle E-Business Suite managed services. So they're providing they're providing that day-to-day operational aspects as much more of a service in terms of people, processes, tickets, things like that. Within Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, OCI, there's two different offerings, Oracle Managed Services and Advanced Customer Support. So there's a couple different offerings within Oracle. Amazon does not offer any managed services, and then the other vendors offer varying degrees. So they can manage everything up through even having the sysadmin account and actually doing your user creation. Some services are just actually applying database patches, keeping your database updated, doing backups and things like that. So there's a lot of difference and variation out there on what's being provided. But generally, most of these cloud providers will provide the basic compute infrastructure for you, will host your Oracle Business Suite environment. And we'll highlight some of the differences, especially between OCI and AWS throughout the presentation today. So this is a diagram from Amazon in terms of how they differentiate between what's your responsibility and what's Amazon's responsibility. And it's very clearly delineated in that they're providing you a service. They're providing you compute nodes, networking capabilities. They're providing you the storage infrastructure. They're providing a vast array of global infrastructure in terms of availability zones, so you can actually have Oracle Business Suite running in two very distinct locations, guaranteed uptime, things like that. What's your responsibility is actually configuring that, making sure all that's working appropriately, the actual install. So they're providing you a server with an operating system pre-installed, but after that, it's your responsibility. It's your responsibility to upgrade the server, actually provide Unix accounts. For the network infrastructure, they're providing you a very robust capability of sets, but it's your responsibility to actually configure that networking, make virtual networks, provide load balancers. They're giving you the load balancer, you point and click and you can set one up very quickly, but it's your responsibility to actually do that. There's no like template that you just say, oh, I need Oracle Business Suite, push a button and they deploy an entire infrastructure for you. You still have to do a lot of that work. And again, where that now from a security consideration, this comes in that, again, look how much work you're doing on something that oftentimes the organization doesn't understand. It's very new to the organization in order to do cloud services. So does your organization appropriately understand how to do this? Are you hiring the appropriate resources? Are you training them to understand on how you do network security? Capital One recently had a data breach that was purely related to someone doing something stupid in terms of network security and opened up access to internal customer data on the internet. So this is not that easy. It is easy to make mistakes. It is easy to do things and open things up accidentally. Because again, it's not like you've got your own perimeter network that's protecting you. You're one step away from the internet, where internally on your own on-premise network, you don't even have access to that being from the Oracle team, where now potentially you might actually be going in and having DBAs set up network configurations and things like that if you're just running Oracle Business Suite and not a lot of other applications. So how this all works can be problematic internally. There are some good resources out there. One of the resources we strongly recommend you if you're looking at cloud providers and doing this is the Cloud Security Alliance. They have the Cloud Controls Matrix, which provides very good resources around how should you actually control this? What are the controls you should be looking at within the cloud provider to actually make sure this works right? So now let's talk about what you should be first doing. And the first thing you should be doing when you're looking at the cloud providers is making sure that the contract, that you're doing this wisely, that you're not just kind of, signing up, yep, let's do it. Making sure that whichever cloud provider you pick, that you're looking at a SOC 1, a SOC 2. These are security reports provided by the cloud provider that says this is how we do controls internally. And make sure that you use a cloud provider that is providing a SOC 1 and 2, and that you're carefully reviewing those to make sure that those security controls that they have in place align with your organization's security controls. So that's a brief background about talking about the cloud, talking a little bit about the impact of Oracle Business Suite in the cloud. But now let's look directly. If I'm going to take Oracle Business Suite on-premise and deploy it to the cloud, what are some of the things I'm going to start looking at? First, we'll talk about Oracle's solution offering. And these are some of the good references that Oracle has in terms of how do I deploy this? What is the general things I should be looking at? And what should I be understanding when I'm deploying this this to the cloud. So Oracle Support's got some very good MetaLink notes to actually walk you through the process on how to lift and shift your existing environment and actually moving it to the Oracle Cloud. So this is a very good starting point. They're pretty informational documents, so they're actually a very good resource to start with. So when we talk about Oracle OCI, what are we talking about? I've got my Oracle Business Suite environment running internally. It's running on a number of servers. I've got my application tiers. I've got my database tiers. So what's it going to look like within the Oracle Cloud? Well, Oracle Cloud has a couple different service offerings. They have what they call the Compute Cloud Service. This is the pure the server. They will fire up a server for you, install a Linux operating system on it, and give you access to that. That may be a virtual machine, maybe bare metal. There's actually a couple options there that I can select, but they're giving you that server, and then you're allowed to basically copy everything on there, run your Oracle Business Suite, WebLogic, form server, concurrent manager servers on that. And so the solution here is, again, this is not a software as a service offering. This is a true, they're just providing you a server. You're installing, you're doing this. And they do have a cloud management console that will actually help you do that. That will actually move this for you. It will automatically do clones, it'll automatically do backups. What's very interesting in the OCI offering is you do have a couple different options for running the database tier. So the application tier is purely a compute node. They're just giving you a server. You're managing Oracle Business Suite application tiers purely on that server. But for the database side, it becomes a little bit different. So your first option is you can actually still do that pure compute node that you're just given a blank server. You're responsible for having the Oracle database server installed. And generally when you're moving from on-premise, you're just copying this up and then running it because of Linux. If you're running Linux internally, Linux is running on these cloud servers. Again, it's virtually the same from the DBA perspective of running on-premise versus in the cloud. They still have the same Oracle login. They're still doing everything. Where the Oracle offering becomes interesting is that they do actually offer the database cloud service. So within Oracle, there's the database cloud service that I can use for just any Oracle database. And what they're doing at that point is they're actually managing the database server for me. They're installing the Oracle software. They're actually bundling the patches, giving me a console. So if I want to actually apply the patches, I can just push a button and get patches installed. So it's a little bit more of a service offering. And I can run it one of three ways. I can run a single instance, I can run an Oracle RAC, or actually can get parts of an Exadata. So now this becomes very powerful that I don't have to actually go spend $1 million on an Exadata. I can just buy that through a subscription offering. And so again, I've got a couple different options here. And then even within these options, Oracle's got different tiers of the Oracle database service that I can do. I can do just Enterprise Edition, I can do High Performance, I can do Extreme Performance, or I can do the Exadata. And the key here is this is just like I'm running it on-premise. I've got SSH access, I'm SSHing as Oracle, I'm doing SQL Net access, but they're providing additional services on top of that. So I still have the same service capabilities that I have internally, the same things I'm going to be doing to manage it, but then they're providing an additional layer of tools on top of that for patching, backups, cloning, those types of things. Where it becomes very interesting is now that we're talking about the Oracle Cloud Database Service. Well, if I just do the compute node, I'm bringing my own licenses. I've got everything internally. It's going to run the exact same way it's running it on-premise. So if I've got transparent data encryption and I move to compute cloud, I have transparent data encryption. However, if I start using the Oracle Database Cloud Service, they're actually now starting to bundle things in as part of that. Yes, I'm paying a subscription service for this no matter what, but I'm paying a little bit additional for the cloud service versus the compute node. But Oracle is throwing in transparent data encryption. And if I select to use the high performance, extreme performance, or Exadata, they're now throwing in all the other security tools for free. Database Vault. I'm getting Oracle Data Redaction. I'm getting Label Security for free as part of that subscription offering. So it isn't bundled in and included. So now, if I was looking to potentially do Database Vault internally, looking to buy those licenses, there's a cost-benefit analysis potentially that you can do, and we've had some clients do that, and actually it's kind of break-even point In some cases, other cases, there's actually a little bit of advantage about moving to cloud because I'm getting database vault, I'm getting data redaction, I'm getting transparent data encryption. So if you don't have those internally today, and I would have to go buy those, if you start doing the licensing for those expensive add-ons, Oracle Cloud Service might be beneficial at that point. So this is kind of where now some of the interesting aspects of security considerations for Oracle Business Suite in the cloud come in, because I potentially may need these. I may want to have transparent data encryption. So I'm getting that as part of this offering. So we're now talking about what are some of the recommendations? What should I be looking at when I'm actually moving to the cloud? So again, when we're talking about Oracle Business Suite in the cloud, I still have complete control. I still have complete control of the application and the database. Unless I sign up for a managed service offering, I am still the DBA. I am still running sysadmin. I'm still logging in as Oracle. I'm still logging in as Apple Manager. Oracle is providing me some capabilities. Amazon's providing me some capabilities. Those other vendors are potentially providing me some capabilities. But at the end of the day, not much is changing for an Oracle Business Suite environment. This is not like moving to Salesforce. This is not moving to Oracle ERP Cloud. Again, I'm still managing everything that I was. So security changes in some regards, but in many regards it doesn't. Where there's potential impacts to security, one is I'm now running in the cloud. I'm now running in a foreign environment that is potentially adversarial because, again, Amazon, Oracle, they're sharing infrastructure. I need to make sure that what they're doing and then what tools they're giving me, I'm using those appropriately. So when I'm doing the network configuration, I'm not just opening it up to the internet. Your auditors may not have experience with running cloud applications. So they may now look at this differently. How do we actually audit this? What do we need to be looking at? Again, they should be requesting the SOC 1 and the SOC 2 to see how that cloud provider is doing this. The number of people who are insiders may increase. So I may be using the Oracle Managed Services offering to actually now provide DBA support. How many DBAs does Oracle have? How many of those DBAs can actually access my environment? Then finally, a lot of issues that we see is, again, your internal staff is not familiar with the way OCI works or Amazon works. They can make mistakes. So they're potentially not trained to be working in these environments very well, and trying to set it up, trying to make it work under strict deadlines, that's when mistakes happen. That's when security misconfigurations happen. That's when somebody opens it up to a wider audience than it should be. So you always need to be thinking about these issues, especially with an environment like Oracle Business Suite, because it's a very complex environment. There's lots of moving parts, and there's lots of integrations. There's lots of things working within the application that I need to make work properly in a new environment that you may not be fully trained on. So the key here is that you still always need kind of that professional management. You need those architects. You need the DBAs. You need people understanding how this is working. Most of the cloud providers really recommend a layered set of skills to be applied here. You still need those cloud architects. You still need the networking person to be setting this up correctly. You still need the DBAs. You still need the Oracle Business Suite application administrators. So everyone should be working together to get this done. And oftentimes in cloud migrations, that team isn't in place. You may be moving Oracle Business Suite as the first application, so everybody is trying to get up to speed. In other cases, those people may be in place. You may have people very familiar with Amazon in terms of how to set up the networking within Amazon and what you want to do, because you've set up 20, 30, 40 other applications. eBusiness Suite just came along late. In other cases, eBusiness Suite is the first application. And again, the cloud vendors aren't providing the service unless you're paying for that additional managed service. So a lot of organizations don't pay for that. They're just using it as a hosting provider as much as anything else. And then you're responsible for setting up the networking. So that's why it's very important that you've got the correct level of expertise, because again, if you do the networking wrong, you're opening up Oracle Business Suite to the internet. You may be opening up the database port. We've seen that before when we've done some of our audits that, oh, they just kind of opened up everything. They didn't quite understand that it was not just to the internal network. Someone made a mistake, picked a different availability zone, region, opened it up to that, and oh, by the way, it was open up publicly. So it's very important when you're starting to look at the cloud providers, so they're providing you the servers, but they're also providing you very robust management consoles. You can do a lot of things in the OCI console, in the Amazon console, that you can kind of set up everything, you organize everything. You can actually do clones, you can do backups. Very powerful tools, but again, they're very powerful tools. From a security perspective, you should be definitely separating these environments out. You should be doing one set of accounts for production, another for test and development. You should be, as much as possible, setting up multi-factor authentication, trying to protect this as much as possible. From a networking perspective, try to do this correctly. Set up security lists correctly, security groups, set up bastion hooks and jump boxes for the DBAs. One of the things that we like to really talk to clients about when we're going through this migration is, what can you do better now? A lot of organizations, their internal network is completely flat. Anybody can access anything from anywhere. Well, when you're moving to OCI, you've got very powerful networking capabilities that you can now block access to different elements. You've got very sophisticated tools, but actually somewhat easy to use in terms of, how do I define who can access what? The old days when you had to submit a firewall request, it had to take a while. Well, you can do that much easier now. It's very quickly to do it with some of these tools, because you're in a little bit more isolated environment, and these management consoles are fairly powerful. So think about re-architecting. How should you be doing this versus just taking what you have internally that may not be the best security architecture from a network perspective when you're moving up into the cloud. And depending on how you do this, things might be changing. Here's an example. Let's talk about database security patches. So when we have database security patches, again, we should be applying those. Most organizations are trying to apply those between 30 and 90 days. When we look at the different options here, when we look at Oracle, if I'm actually picking that database cloud service, I can actually now apply these patches through the Service Console. I can do it through the command line. And what's happening is Oracle is bundling those patches, providing you pre-bundled patches that I can apply. Well, if I'm using just a compute node, same thing was happening before internally. I still have to apply those patches as I was. If I'm running Amazon, they're providing you no capabilities in this area. So when I'm applying patches, it's the same as on-premise. So things change a little bit depending on my configuration, depending on my vendor, what I'm doing. So database security patches are just one example of this. There's kind of a number of these examples that I have to just be conscious of the decision that I'm making. We like database cloud service. We think you should be running that because, again, you're getting database vault, you're getting transparent data encryption, you're getting a lot of additional services when you're moving to that you don't have to pay for. You're paying as part of your subscription, but you're getting that. Some of the other features in the cloud services, patching is a little bit different. I can actually just click some buttons and actually apply patches a little bit easier way than I was before. One of the key things that we always like to work with our clients is trust but verify, especially if you're using managed services. Because again, when we're talking about managed services, I'm now opening up the DBA team is not my DBA team anymore. I'm potentially using, and we typically see one of two scenarios where you're using managed services to supplement your DBA team, or the second scenario is I'm replacing my DBA team with an outsourced managed service. So what are those resources doing? We've got one client we're working with right now and trying to set up this auditing is they've got actually 3 companies running their DBA team, fairly large organization, but they've actually got 3 different outsourced companies, one being the vendor, a second one actually doing development type DBA work, and a third providing 7x24 support. So how are all 3 of those organizations doing this appropriately? How many DBAs actually have access to your environment? What accounts are they using? What are they doing when they're using those accounts? Who's actually making changes? Who's not making changes? So we always like to say, trust but verify. Put in the appropriate levels of control so you know what's changing in your environment, that you've got actually the set of data so you can understand who's connecting to what databases at what time. And so you need some sort of continuous auditing to do this. So you have to have a very robust log and audit framework that's looking at the whole stack. So everyone who's logging into the application, everyone who's logging into the database, all changes being made at the database, you need to have that data to understand, especially if you're using these managed services. In order to help our clients around this, and actually because we've found the information so useful for so many clients, we've actually published out our framework internally that we use with clients. And it's called the Framework for Oracle Business Suite Logging and Auditing, and we've published it on our website. It's a very good starting point to actually give you some recommendations and advice how you should set this up. We believe you should be doing this both on-premise and in the cloud, but when you're moving to the cloud, especially if you're doing some of the managed services, it becomes very important so you understand what's happening, who's connecting where, you've got that data, especially trying to meet compliance requirements. So for SOX, you need to know all changes happening in the environment. Are those approved and appropriate? If you're running PCI, you need to know who's accessing what at what time. It's a very strict compliance around that. And there's aspects here that you need to be thinking about. So if you use the Oracle Database service for the database side of things, well, Oracle only maintains those logs for 14 days. So we've had some clients said, oh yeah, no, Oracle told us they're logging everything. We've got full audit logs. We've got the listener logs. Oh, by the way, the default is 14 days. So they're purging that data because, again, they're the guys buying the disk, not you. So they want to make sure that they're as economical as possible and trying to save money because they're trying to scale this out to hundreds and thousands of customers. So they only keep it for 14 days. So again, this is one example where you actually have to go in and change those retention periods, have capabilities to actually pull those files off the servers and actually put them and store them and archive them and report on them. So very quickly about the Integrigy framework for auditing and logging. Again, there's many key events. There's many different points within the application that you need to be thinking about. And our framework actually goes through both on the database to the application side and how do you actually push this into a centralized logging solution. When we talk about what events that should be mapped, we've actually done that all within the framework. So we've actually taken the major compliance standards and defined out a very robust set of security events from logins, changes to credentials, changes to privileges, creation of objects and things like that, and actually mapped it out based on these different compliance requirements. What should you be capturing? And then we actually take it down within the framework to say, okay, these are the audits you turn on at the database level. These are the audits you turn on at the application level in order to capture all this information. So this is kind of a very good starting point. Again, you need this information to have the visibility into what's happening at the cloud provider, especially if you're using managed services. So when we start looking at the audit and log framework, is the key thing is how do you get this information, then get it so you can actually make decisions. So one of the key things as part of the framework is we're trying to push this into a security council. We're trying to push this where it can be used. And the different providers actually have very good tools. So if it's at Amazon, they have CloudWatch. You may be running tools like Splunk internally. Oracle has their log management platform. So you need to be really looking at this and how do you actually manage this data, make sure that you can report on it, and also are protecting and archiving it as necessary. So some other key aspects that you really need to be thinking about and are very critical to the overall success of your cloud implementation are things like network security. And when we're talking about network security, this now becomes very important because it's a shared infrastructure. It's very close to the internet. It's very easy just to open up some ports and actually open up a subnet out to the public cloud. So when you're working through this, each vendor does it slightly differently. And there is some complexity to it. It's not super simple, but it's not super hard. They have nice cloud management platforms to do this. But again, you're now hopefully improving the security when you're moving from on-premise. It may be completely flat. Everybody internally on your network can access everything. Well, hopefully you're now taking this, putting in the cloud provider and actually improving it. So having multiple subnets to protect, you're setting up the bastion host, you're setting up a separate database subnet, you're setting up the application tiers, you're opening up the application tiers externally that need to be external, you're opening up the ones that are only for internal use to your on-premise network. So how all these ports work and things like that are very important. And again, when you go through it, it's not super simple, but it's not super complex. But again, you're setting up security lists for Oracle. Within the OCI framework, you've got security lists, route tables. You've got these different types of gateways. You have to configure all this appropriately. That's easy to do, and it works well. The problem that happens that we find all the time, we kind of always try to do root cause analysis of when we do our assessments, we find major issues, is why did this go wrong? And what happened was you don't have a lot of time to get this working correctly. Most cloud migration, the vendor has told us, oh yeah, it'll take 30 days. Yeah, you can just pop it up, push a couple buttons, it's going to be up and running. You'll be able to do it in a couple hours, things like that. Things don't work that easy. So when things don't work and people don't have a lot of skills or experience, they just tend to open things up. So we often find just every single port's open, the whole environment may be open to the internet just because there were some misconfigurations. And most often when we trace back what happened was they just didn't have time. It was just like a struggle. Like we had to make it work. We were down for the 16 hours that would take the migration at our final production cutover. We tested. And the final migration and cutover, it didn't work right. So we just kind of started flipping some switches to try to make it work because we were under the gun. That's when we see a lot of problems here. And as you can see from these diagrams, these aren't having the correct ports. And again, this is very simplistic. Most of these often have 10, 20, 30 ports open, multiple subnets. Again, this is for a production environment. I will have different test and development environments also. So I'm managing a lot just for an Oracle Business Suite system. And again, an Oracle Business Suite, even a simple Oracle Business Suite environment has 3 servers. I also might have internal servers, external servers. I have a lot of interfaces coming in. I've got a lot of different things going on. I may be trying to deploy Oracle Enterprise Manager to connect to this environment. I may have 20, 30 interfaces. So again, this becomes very complex very quickly, and just having it all working correctly and making sure that it's right, especially in something that's new to the organization, can be a challenge. And again, each cloud provider does it differently also. When we're talking about Amazon now, we're looking at regions and availability zones. You can set up route tables. The security is a couple different layers. I can open up things internally, externally. So it does become very complex very quickly for the different providers. So again, you just have to be thinking through this, spending the time and doing it appropriately. And also verifying that it has been done appropriately, having the audit, the assessment, that somebody is actually reviewing all this and making sure it's correct. And again, when you're moving to the cloud, hopefully you're doing network security right. So instead of just opening up port 22, letting everyone on your internal network SSH in every server, that may be happening today on-premise, improving that when you are going to the cloud. So setting up appropriate bastion hosts. So for the DBAs now connecting to each server, they actually have to connect to a bastion host, which now is limiting them from actually accessing the Oracle user from any desktop within the organization. Improving that, blocking the ports that aren't required, making sure the ACLs are correct so only the authorized people can access these different servers. Another thing is that these services provide very powerful load balancers. So now I can actually deploy very quickly and easy load balancers, where before I had to go buy an F5. I had to go put that in, configure it. I may be doing that just for Oracle Business Suite, which was very costly. I may not have the resources internally to do that. But now I can deploy at Oracle, Amazon, all these services. I can deploy a load balancer very quickly. You should definitely be using the providers load balancers for SSL TLS termination versus doing it in the application servers. Oracle's eBusiness Suite SSL TLS stack is dated. It's got significant problems in it, constantly patches coming out for it. But if you're actually using the load balancer, again, now the cloud provider is patching that load balancer. So when a new TLS bug comes out, you don't have to worry about that because behind the scenes, they're actually doing that patching of those load balancers. It will also act as a reverse proxy server. So you're getting some benefits. Some benefits are more than others. The one we like is the load balancers because it is providing you some additional capabilities. You can also, on some of these networking configurations, use like for Amazon. Amazon has the global accelerator. So this is a very robust content delivery network capability that allows you to short circuit people's paths to your servers. So if you have a large international deployment of Oracle Business Suite that has lots of users all over the world, you can actually improve performance dramatically by deploying the global accelerator, which reduces your end user's latency connecting to your Oracle Business Suite servers. So instead of having to traverse the public internet for long distances, they actually jump into the Amazon network very quickly, which is a much higher performance network than having to jump through multiple hosts, potentially then having to just connect like in Chicago when you use the Amazon Global Accelerator, they jump into the Amazon network from their region and then go across the massive backbone of Amazon. So there's things that you can do that actually improve both security, but also include performance overall. So the last topic here is database security features. And so moving to the cloud, the idea here is you're doing a little bit of a rehosting. So why not get some improvements out of it? What are some of the database security features? And again, when you move to Oracle, if you move to the database cloud service, you're getting these services potentially for free. So why not take advantage of them? There's some very powerful things you can do. So we'll kind of jump back to this one slide is when we look at the database cloud service, this is an option for eBusiness Suite at Oracle. I can now do the high performance, extreme performance option, and I'm getting database vault. I'm getting data redaction, which both work with Oracle Business Suite. And for free, I'm also getting transparent data encryption. So again, one of the reasons I want to use transparent data encryption is because I'm running on shared storage. I'm running on their storage, so I want to make sure my data is encrypted in case they lose a disk drive, those types of things. So like on encryption, when we're talking about encryption, there's a couple different layers. There's network encryption, so when data is going from point A to point B on the network, is that encrypted on the wire? Storage encryption, is that encrypted on the disk? There's also access encryption. So when someone's trying to access data, do they see it encrypted? And is there capabilities to actually enforce access control lists around that encryption? The cloud providers don't provide that, and this is not available in Oracle Business Suite. So we'll focus here on network encryption and storage encryption. So when we're looking at these different vendors, so if I'm looking at the cloud database service from Oracle, SQL Net Encryption is enabled by default. Well, if I'm just using the compute node service, it's not. It's just basically the way I was running it before internally. I may not have been encrypting data before. But again, now I'm on more of a shared infrastructure. I probably do want to encrypt that traffic, even going between my application servers and database servers. The same thing that happens at Amazon because, again, I'm just running the way I was before as on-premise, and I should be turning on these levels of encryption so it's encrypted on the backbone of their network. Database encryption is very also important because, again, I'm running this on shared storage. And so now I'm trying to protect because, again, when they pull a disk drive out of a storage array, what happens to that disk drive? Do you know that's happening? If I read their SOC 1, SOC 2, it should be saying it's destroyed appropriately, but do I know that's actually true? Do they just kind of throw it in the garbage one day? So I want to make sure my data is always encrypted, especially when running in the cloud. So I want to make sure it's being done appropriately. So I want to have transparent data encryption. The key thing about transparent data encryption is it's encrypting data at rest. So it's protecting you from a few scenarios. One is if I lose a disk drive. If someone hacks into the server and steals the database files, the backup tapes are automatically encrypted. So again, backup tapes are really backups of data files. So when I run transparent data encryption, the data on the backup tapes are automatically encrypted. The thing that transparent data encryption doesn't do, and this always kind of upsets me when we talk to management, like, oh yeah, it's encrypted everywhere, it's always encrypted. It is encrypted if you lose a disk drive, but it's not encrypted once someone signs into the database. So just always keep in mind when you're thinking about transparent data encryption, once someone signs into the database, it's not encrypted. So you always have to make sure that you're still protecting all layers of the technology stack and making sure that anyone who's logging into the database is properly authorized. Because again, they're seeing the data unencrypted, it's providing you no protection there. So transparent data encryption works differently at the different providers. So if I'm at Oracle, I'm using the database cloud service, I'm automatically getting Oracle transparent data encryption. So when I do my lift and shift, Oracle is automatically doing that for me. That has not always been the case. So we've actually found a number of scenarios, though, where when you did the lift and shift, TD was not being turned on by default. And so the organization would say, oh, no, Oracle told me it was being turned on. In a number of cases, it has not been. So always make sure that transparent data encryption was actually enabled. This is especially problematic if you did not have it internally. If you had transparent data encryption running internally, you did a lift and shift, it should have been encrypted. And Oracle also provides very good capabilities because, again, now I can actually have Oracle Key Vault running, and I can actually store all my keys in a separate system that's highly fault tolerant, things like that. So again, there's different levels of capabilities. When we talk about Amazon, Amazon is just like running it on premise. I have to buy a license for TD. They'll give me a few capabilities to help me manage my keys, but again, there's no capability to rotate the TD master key. So each vendor is slightly different on what level of capabilities, how much support they provide. The farther you get away from Oracle, the less support there is. But most vendors, of all the security products around Oracle, the one that they provide the best support for is typically transparent data encryption. If you're at a cloud provider not running transparent data encryption, there's something wrong with you. You really need to be looking at making sure that you're running TD at a minimum. But again, TD is a very expensive option here. So you just have to kind of always weigh the pros and cons. What are the security risks when you're actually deploying Oracle Business Suite into the cloud? One of the tools we like, and especially when we talked about moving to, especially if you move to Oracle, you're now getting Database Vault for free. And there's a number of significant issues within the Oracle database that cause problems, and Database Vault is actually one of those that actually provides you a lot of benefits in terms of limiting who has access to what. And the biggest one within the Oracle database is there's two ways you can actually grant privileges. You can grant privileges to objects, or you can do select any table. There is no way to say, just for HR, I've got an ad hoc user that's accessing data in just the HR schema. I either have to grant them every single object in HR, or I give them select any table. And in the vast majority of our security assessments, what we find is select any table is widely abused. I can't tell you how many databases we audit and see the select any table granted to 20, 30, 40, 50 users. Because the DBAs, it's just like, I don't know what they need access to. If I just give it everything to them, it's real easy because I don't have the capability to say, oh, here's HR. Database Vault solves that problem. Within Database Vault, I can actually do rules that say, this user has access just to objects in HR schema. So I can take that select any table and actually drive it down to just a schema level and other capabilities. So again, if I'm moving to Oracle and I use the higher extreme performance plan, I get Database Vault for free. If I go to Amazon, I have to now purchase this license and implement it separately. One of the things that we love to do is, again, when we're now talking about going to the cloud provider, how can I actually improve security? How can I actually take this and actually add in additional layers that I didn't have internally? And one is use Database Vault and the command rule to limit direct access. So I can actually do very sophisticated rules. And we see some organizations do this with login triggers and things like that. We think the Database Vault is a lot more robust capability to do it, that I can say, okay, for the sys account, you can only access it from the database server, and especially if the OS user is Oracle. For the apps account, it can only come from the EBS servers, things like that. DBAs can only come in. If you've got the DBA role, you can only use it from the EBS jump server, things like that. So very capable to limit access to the database. And our number one security recommendation at the end of the day is, for the database, is if you can't log into the database, that eliminates a huge amount of security risk. Because again, most organizations have a large number of ad hoc users accessing, especially the Oracle Business Suite database. Any of those users typically can exploit security vulnerabilities. There's a number of ways you can escalate security privileges within the Oracle Business Suite. You're not applying security patches and things like that. So anything that you can do to limit direct database access is very beneficial in an Oracle Business Suite environment, because it just dramatically reduces your security risk. So we've kind of gone through and just talked about at a very high level, what are some of the things you need to be thinking about? What are some of the benefits? What are some of the disadvantages? And what are some of the things that you really need to be just at least thinking about and doing when you move Oracle Business Suite into the cloud? And what are some of the different options? And again, each vendor is different, but there's definitely some capabilities. And always think about, how can I improve security? A lot of organizations just quickly do a lift and shift, and they don't have any improvement. There are things that you can do to actually improve security, and some of these vendors give you better tools, give you better capabilities to actually block access, limit access, have better control, better logging, and things like that within the cloud. So I'll turn it back over to Phil and see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Steve. We have a couple of questions here. The first one, Are all the cloud providers the same, or is one better than the other in terms of security?
So, not an easy question to answer. There are some benefits for some of them versus others. Let me say at the start, there's not one vendor that we say, oh, is awesome, as you should definitely go to. They all have pros and cons. They all have varied levels of support and capabilities. So there's no one vendor that we recommend at this point, but definitely when you work with them, they do have security teams, and if you push security, they'll work with you. Most organizations are kind of timid about security. They don't really want to bring it up. They don't want to tackle it. But if you work with a cloud provider, they will definitely work with you to actually have a much more secure environment than a lot of the other cloud clients that they're running also.
Next question. Why not open the network to everything from our internal network?
So again, we see that in a lot of cases, especially running on premise, that e-business suite is wide open. Again, when we do our breach incident responses, one of the key things is, well, everything was open. So anyone from anywhere on the internal network could find the database servers, could log into them, could find vulnerabilities in the web applications, could access consoles that they shouldn't be accessing. So again, what we're trying to do is reduce risk at the end of the day. And if you can't connect to an Oracle database, you can't hack it. Pure and simple. So you can provide a very robust layer of security if you just can't have access. But again, that's not realistic because you have interfaces, you have ad hoc users. So what controls can you put in to at least limit that as much as possible? Because again, if you've got 10,000 people on your network, do all 10,000 need to see your database server to be able to connect to it? Probably not. So if you can put in at least some layers of controls, you can reduce the risks and the issues. And we have a number of breaches that we've investigated in the past few years that if the organizations had just had some simple network security controls, they would have prevented the breach, pure and simple. So there's no easier way to say that is you can prevent a breach by putting in some fairly simple controls, limiting from 10,000 people to maybe 100 people. And that would have eliminated a lot of organizations' nightmares and pain by just doing those simple things. And it's not that difficult for the organization to do, especially when you've got the cloud tools running. And if you do it right, just by putting in a jump server and just limiting access to that, that is a very effective control without a lot of operational issues or operational pain to the organization.
Next question. What tools does Oracle provide to help check for security bugs in our environment?
So Oracle does provide a few basic tools. So if you're running either on-premise or even in the cloud, Oracle's got the Secure Configuration Console within Oracle Business Suite. That provides about 20 very basic checks within the application. For the database layer, they do provide a DBSAT tool. So if you're not doing anything, definitely be running Secure Configuration Console within eBusiness Suite and DBSAT. But those tools are limited. They're not very robust at all. They're doing some basic checks. But as a comparison, those two tools do about 50 different checks against the database in the eBusiness Suite environment. If you run App Sentry, you'll get over 500 different checks being run. We just did a massive assessment for a large organization, a large number of databases. We actually benchmarked App Sentry against the DBSAT tool. DBSAT found about 20 different default passwords and weak passwords in the environment. App Sentry found 1,000. So very powerful in terms of finding additional things. The security patch reporting is much better in App Sentry. It'll tell you exactly what you need to do versus DBSAT, those types of things. So yes, run those tools if you don't want to run anything. Those are both included. But if you really want the robust layer of security checking that you need, a tool like App Sentry is highly recommended.
That's the last of our questions, Steve. So I want to thank everybody for participating this afternoon. And also be sure to mark your calendars for next month. That's March 19th. The webinar there will be Effective Oracle eBusiness Suite Change Management from DBA to Auditor. And it's a joint presentation by Steve and Jeffrey Hare, who's a CPA. So it should be extremely interesting webinar at that time. So thanks again, everybody, and have a good rest of the day.